The God Dose, a 5-MeO DMT and cannabis strip report, uploaded to Erowid by Face on January 25th, 2010. Me and my friends have done many psychedelics. In the years, I've gone way beyond what I thought tripping was. I first thought tripping was all about colours and trails. Then it became about passing this one point, where all of reality goes out the window, and anything is possible to see or do. But now, it's all about the spirituality in nature. I hadn't really started doing the wild strong doses until after the near-death experience. After the NDE, we started calling ourselves fearless psychonauts. It was just like any other day. Me and my friends were smoking pot just like usual. My friend Ken had purchased a gram of 5-MeO DMT. We'd been experimenting with it for about 3 days. We'd sprinkle just a smidge on a bowl of pot. Felt like eating a couple hits of decent acid. The trails were massive, the colours were prevalent, and even though there was an uncomfortable body rush at first, it was the bomb. So me and Ken were sitting in his room. He had already come down from smoking some 5-MeO. He smoked it about 20 minutes before I took the hit. Ken is my most experienced friend with tripping. He has eaten 12 hits of acid all at once with no tolerance. He was the one that showed me colours and trails are only the first step into a completely different universe. Ken covered the entire bowl of pot with 5-MeO. He said, "I dare you to take the biggest hit yet." I obviously, trying to look like a badass in front of my friend, was like, "You're damn right I will." So, I did. I put the lighter to it and took the hit. It tasted just like any other hit of 5-MeO, burning plastic. This hit was different though. I exhaled it. Ken looked at me and asked me if I felt anything. I looked at him and said no, because I honestly didn't. Oh shit, was I wrong. I slowly started feeling my breath weakening. I was breathing less and less with every breath. I was trying to breathe harder and harder, but it was just making it worse. I leaned back on the bed because I had no physical energy left from the lack of air. Then, as I felt the last of my breath leave my lungs, I closed my eyes. As my eyes closed, I saw no colours. My soul rose above my body. I looked back and saw my body laying lifeless on my friend's bed. Then I looked forward towards the dark tunnel. My body started moving towards the tunnel, and then the tunnel started moving towards me. It was as if we were trying to meet one another. Once we started moving towards one another, a white light appeared at the end of the tunnel. When I was about 6 feet away from the white light, someone started to come out of it. The light was pure and blinding. I looked around because it was so bright. The tunnel was now completely infinite. Surrounding me were thousands of orbs that appeared like eyes. For a visual hint, look at Alex Grey's Dying. The orbs appeared to be like eyes, because they were shaped just like an eye, and I could see through them. The eyes were looking at different places in the universe, at all the points in time. I could see all and everything that has and will ever happen. I then looked forward, and the most beautiful, most peaceful, and most gentle woman walked out of the light. Her hair was brown, her cheeks were rose-coloured, and her skin looked softer than the petal of a rose. She was wearing a white robe that had a hood that was up, and the robe covered her whole body. And then with the softest, most serene voice, she spoke. The first thing she said was, "Don't be scared, my child, for it is not your time to go." Then all the fear that I had instilled in my body went away. I didn't know why, but I knew I could trust her. Then every question I ever had about life, religion, or God was answered. It's hard to say everything that was told to me because it's difficult and it chokes me up every time I think about it, but I tried to state everything the woman had said to me. The woman told me that no religion is wrong, because it's just the word of God being seen and spoken through another person's eyes. You can only sway a person's thoughts, because a person will always think what they want, because they think it's their life and their rules. The woman said we are born. Then, we are meant to enjoy all of life, the good, the bad, and everything in between, because that is the meaning of life, to simply enjoy it. Because that was God's gift to us as her children, the most precious thing God could provide us with, life. She said when we die, our soul returns back with God, and our body is meant to stay in the earth to fertilise other life such as plants. Everything happens in cycles. Just like our lives, it is the same with all everyday occurrences. Then after we return with God in heaven, we get to receive all the riches of the afterlife. And then as quickly as I got there and received the knowledge people search for their whole lives, my eyes were opening and I was sitting up. A physical wind started moving out of my chest. It was the greatest feeling of ecstasy one can ever feel. I looked at Ken, and both of our eyes were filled with tears. Then just as we were about to cry, our friend who had left the room to use the bathroom had entered, and we acted as if nothing had happened. Our friend could tell something happened, but had no clue what. We spoke about it the next day. Apparently when I sat back and stopped breathing, Ken said a woman's voice that he had never heard came out of me, speaking through me words of great wisdom. I couldn't believe that the woman spoke through me, and asked him what she said, and he said everything word for word what happened. It changed me and him forever. Not only did I become religious, but Ken did too. And that is a change for him, because he was one of the people that I knew was extremely evil. He's done some wild, unmentionable shit. And by unmentionable, I mean unimaginable. All I can say now is that God is real. I spoke to the Mother Mary, and it doesn't matter if you can believe me or not, because God and I know the truth. I am an agnostic turned completely around into a religious person.
This weekend, I had my first experience with 5-MeO DMT. I had my best friend come over to trip sit me and make sure nothing bad happened while I was away. I thought my backyard would be a safe place to smoke, so I put some 5-MeO DMT in a makeshift pipe and sat on a swing on my back deck. I brought the lighter to the pipe and inhaled very deeply. The last thing I remember from this reality was passing the pipe to my friend to hold. Before the pipe was even out of my hands, everything began to blur and vibrate. The next thing I know, everything in my immediate proximity was sucked into a vortex in the middle of my field of vision. I felt as if my body was imploding on itself as I was shot through this vortex at an extremely fast speed. The entire time I heard an almost electric buzzing noise that got increasingly louder and louder until it was almost too much to bear. I can't even stress how loud and uncomfortable this felt. I felt completely overwhelmed in extreme pain and fear. My skin felt like it was burning off. I was so completely confused and was convinced I had died. I felt like I should not have been in the place I was. Eventually, I felt as if I completely imploded on myself and had reached the end of the vortex where I might have been broken through some barrier. It is all kind of fuzzy. I can barely remember what happened after this. I vaguely remember interacting with other beings in this other world, but can't remember what they look like though. I don't even know if I saw them. It was almost like I was using other senses that I have never used before and communicating in ways I didn't even know were possible. Time did not exist. Reality as I knew it before was insignificant and arbitrary. Then, all of a sudden, I was back. I opened my eyes to a blurry figure. At first, I thought I was looking in a mirror at myself, but then realized it was someone else. Initially, the world around me looked foreign and made no sense. I remember yelling, "Where am I? Who are you? What happened?" To which the figure responded, "It's your friend Matthew. You just smoked 5-MeO DMT. Everything is okay now." I finally realized that it was my friend and I was in my backyard, and I stood up. My heart was racing and I couldn't calm myself down. I looked down at my hands and body and realized I was completely covered in blood. It took me almost an hour to calm down after what had happened to me. All I could do for 30 minutes following the trip was run around my house screaming, "What the fuck just happened? Where did I just go? I'm never gonna be the same." I remember feeling extremely relieved to be back in this reality and far away from the place I was transported to. When my friend finally calmed me down, I said to him, "Ignorance was bliss." I wish I remembered more, but it's just like how if you don't write your dreams down when you wake up, you won't be able to remember them later in the day. After finally getting a grip on this reality, I asked my friend what happened to me. My body was covered in blood and my clothes were all ruined. Apparently, after I exhaled the 5-MeO DMT, I sat on the swing for about 30 seconds. Then suddenly, I bolted into my backyard into the woods where I hurled myself down a wooden ravine. My friend said he tried to restrain me, but was unable to. I proceeded to roll down the ravine, screaming at the top of my lungs. My friend said he was doing his best to move logs and rocks out of the way as I went down the ravine. but I still managed to hit my head on some. I cut my face all up and sprained my wrist. My back is all cut up and my entire body aches even 2 days later. I have a bruise on my arm about 3 inches in diameter that is almost black. When I reached the bottom of the ravine, I hit my head on a log and was completely knocked out. My friend said he took my pulse while I was unconscious, and it hit around 120 beats per minute. A few hours after the trip, I said to my friend, DMT is to LSD as LSD is to water. My friend replied with, no, DMT is to LSD as DMT is to water. Acid doesn't come close to DMT, and all other psychedelics now seem like a joke compared to what I experienced. My entire life and concept of reality has been changed. I can't help but feel like I saw something that everyone needs to see at least once in their lives. I don't know how I can go on living a normal life, knowing stuff like that exists. I would like to try it again sometime in the future, but I don't want to go through the pain again. I assume the pain was a result of me falling down the ravine, but I can't be sure. Has anyone else had a painful experience? Trying 5-MeO-DMT was the most significant event in my life since birth. I forgot to add how once I broke through the barrier and into this other world, some of my experiences there felt familiar. It was almost like deja vu. I don't know if the stuff I was seeing was so strange because it was new and foreign, or if it was stuff I had already seen before but just couldn't understand anymore. I feel like maybe I didn't visit another dimension, but was reborn in this world instead of right there in the woods. Maybe all the pathways and knowledge my brain has created over the last 21 years were destroyed and rapidly made again in 7 minutes. Could it be that the drug just broke all the pathways and everything around me seemed new, even though I had experienced it before? Maybe my mind regressed to that of a newborn, and I felt like I was in another dimension, when really, I was just in my backyard.
Right setting and dosage. A 5-MeO-DMT trip report by R2D4. Uploaded to Erowid May 15, 2003. When I did 5-MeO, 6 of us, including our excellent host, created a circle around a blanket and a pillow. Very faintly, there was the recorded sound of Tibetan crystal bowls sounding over an exceptionally great sound system. The lights dimmed. We collectively set the intention to each experience the highest possible vibration of love, whatever that turns out to be. I was the first to go. Our host loaded the glass pipe as I situated myself in the middle of the circle. I was instructed to practice laying back on the pillow so that I was in the exact right position to do so. Our host approached me with a small chemist torch and handed me the pipe. The only sounds were the 6 of us breathing and the faint harmonic drone of the crystal bowls. And then, suddenly the torch. I exhaled completely and put the mouthpiece to my lips. I inhaled slowly and nervously as he hovered the blue flame a good inch above the diminutive yellow pile in the centre of the bowl. The pile disintegrated as I pulled the heat of the flame into the pipe, the substance sizzling into smoke. The smoke filled my lungs, and he sharply switched off the torch. A strange silence remained as I held my breath, then a really, really strange silence. I began to lie down. Before I hit the pillow, I sensed a rapidly increasing vibration in my body, from the tips of my toes and fingers to the ends of the hairs of my head, deep in my bones and throughout my viscera. While I was still able, I imagined that this deeply penetrating euphoria is what it must feel like just after one has been hit square on by a locomotive, before the pain sets in. A deep and calming, yet terrifyingly inevitable disintegration of the physical occurred. I closed my eyes. I assume I exhaled what was left of the smoke, and I found my way into the supine position, because before I could gauge any further sense of movement or distance, colours entered my perception in impossible layers as the rate of disintegration increased in exponential leaps. Any concept of time or relative space fractured into a quadrillion holographic pixels and was carried off along with the rest of manifest existence, in impossibly fast motion, by another quadrillion overly anxious nano-sized carnivorous ants. I, seemed to travel some immense distance in an instant, or more like a non-instant. My perception at once exploded and imploded infinitely. Matrix and lattice-like colour patterns gave birth in non-time to explosions of sparks which were galactic in the inward scope and scale. Simultaneously, these explosions recurred, compounded, echoed, moving my consciousness inward and outward in unimaginable magnitude. Eventually, into the yawning maw of nothingness I went. All ability to fathom halted. All sense of I became totally transparent. Instantly, gone. No self or ego. Breathing, heartbeat, earth life, past experience. It never existed. Absorbed into the infinite, timeless, all-permeating singularity. The sheer titanic bliss of the void. This lasted forever. It was a death. What can I possibly call it? It was a state of some sort. The annihilation of experience, actually. Infinite, unmanifest potential. Words do not really work here. The next thing I remember, my first clue that my mind was moving out of the infinite, is simply a very distant sense of having had some kind of individuated experience. A sense that I was I in some vague etheric conscious form, and that I was experiencing, or had experienced, something far beyond what I thought I could experience. No more visuals had come to my consciousness since the galactic sparks. I remember taking my first breath, which seemed literally like my first breath ever, and with that, a sense of the dimension of time and space. An inconceivable amount of time had seemed to pass when I finally perceived this. My sense of identity was still a million light years away. My body began to reassemble itself slowly and quantumly over a series of miraculous breaths. Hardly able to believe what I had just experienced. Deeply, deeply moved and astonished beyond words, totally beyond words, I laid there and breathed. I sensed the powerful presence of my friends, those spirits sitting with me, around me, in a circle, breathing with me in support of a deeply personal communion with something inexplicable, untouchable, untaintable, far beyond any concept of ancient, and really quite as terrifying as it is beautiful, and it is beautiful beyond imagining. The infinite. Coming back into my body was akin to orgasmic, but different and subtler, more exquisite, more detectably subatomic. I felt compelled to move into a kneeling position. I looked with reverence at my friends in the circle, and wiped away a few tears that had apparently pooled there. Our host quietly informed me that 8 minutes had passed. I was still feeling a bit high. I remained kneeling in silent meditation with the circle for the next couple or few minutes. Then, I retreated to the edge, smiling and utterly grateful. Next, I said. I believe that I had experienced an aspect of greater mind, that we have the capacity within our own nervous systems to experience this because it is who we are. It's not so much about the 5-MeO DMT, not really, but to the extent that it is definitely about the dosage and the setting. It's so worth doing it right. Therein lies the shamanic art of administering externally, the experience of the eternal and internal self.
Set. 2 friends tried 5-MeO DMT and had truly horrendous, frightening experiences. They'd seemed to go back and forth about whether I should or should not try it. Initially, when it was described to me, I was kind of horrified that they had tried it, and I said I never experiment with the substance. I carefully considered their descriptions of their experiences though, and thought about what they seemed to get out of it. I read experience reports and whatever literature I could find on the substance, and decided that my only real reason for not trying it was caution that I'd have an unpleasant experience. I decided that whatever there was to face, I should face it, and whatever I might learn from myself or the experience, whether good or bad, I shouldn't shy away from it. I've been on a shamanic path for many years and was familiar with altered states long before I ever experimented with any entheogen or the like. When I've tried other things, I felt that I was more or less prepared. With this, I didn't feel prepared, but in a way, the That's what I wanted. I wanted something that I would not be in control of, that I would not know precisely what to expect. I went into it knowing I might have a very bad experience, and I was somewhat nervous, but I'm pretty good at dealing with feelings of nervousness. During the day, I'd mentally attempted to prepare myself and to ask either the universe or my subconscious to give me whatever I needed, good or bad. Setting. I went to a friend's apartment, a place with a good energy where I feel very comfortable. It was just two good friends and I present. There was a comfy bed to fall back on after I inhaled. Usage. Several 8 to 10 milligram doses of crystalline 5-MeO DMT granules, rendered into vapor by heating over a lighter. I felt like such a druggie. The initial 4 doses did almost nothing. I wasn't sure I felt anything at all. The 5th dose was slightly larger, and that resulted in an extremely powerful experience that came on within a single breath. When I inhaled the first dose, rendered into smoke in a small glass pipe, about 8 to 10 milligrams, nothing happened. A friend who was sitting for me had me wait a few minutes, and we tried again. The only thing I felt was that the nervousness vanished as we joked about how resistant I seemed to be to some substances. We waited about 10 minutes in between doses. It was not until the 5th dose, slightly larger than the rest, maybe 10 to 12 milligrams, that anything happened. I laid down on the bed and felt different. I remember that the sensation was so incredibly powerful, so far beyond anything that I'd felt before, but it was accompanied by absolute bliss. It wasn't a body bliss, or even like a serotonin happy feeling. It was as though nearly all of my mortalness had dropped away, leaving me with only a tiny connection with which to speak. I can't specifically describe the visual effect of what I was seeing. It was like a background to the actual experience. The only thing that I could say was that things seemed to be beautiful during the experience, that I felt like closing my eyes was a waste, though there was no discomfort at doing so. I felt as though all the answers to things that I already had waiting in me, from my accumulated life and experience, were sitting right there, and I could understand them. For a few moments, I lost English. I couldn't speak in English, though it's my native tongue. Because I wanted to share a little of what I was experiencing though, I began, a moment later, to speak. It was as if my body was acting on its own to convey some of what I felt and was experiencing. It was as though my body, my personality, were only a sort of window through which my larger soul viewed the world. There was no sense that everything is an illusion precisely, nor did I feel a oneness with the universe. What I felt was the impression that at some point, everyone and everything had been created by some unknowable source that we can no longer completely and directly perceive. I felt like everything that I was a smaller part of that whole pattern, like a piece of a greater image containing the basic patterns that could be used, perhaps, to create the whole, but which did not at the moment contain that whole. I felt that there was no way of really knowing if I was right, or if what I was made of was really perfect in origin, but I felt that whatever made me either knew what it was doing, or didn't, and that all I could do was trust and act as if it must have known. And then, I had a feeling as if I'd stopped, for a few moments, being this mortal person that I am, that just the most refined and larger parts of myself were active. It was like suddenly turning my head and realizing that the real me was this big divine being, not God, but created by some great creator, full of self-will and the ability to decide what was good, or right, or beautiful, and strive to make it part of creation. Really, there are no words at all for what I felt. I read these, and they're just not good enough. I've had difficulty describing this even to people close to me, because, well, you've heard the word ineffable. While it was happening, it partly seemed to go on forever, but at the same time, a part of me kept track of time pretty normally. I didn't feel any real time dilation or distortion had occurred. After I started to come down, I felt, for about 30 minutes, just really great. The only thing that I can liken it to is MDMA, except that my brain felt incredibly clear. I felt so clear-headed about everything that I asked my friends to just go ahead and ask me something, anything. One of them asked me, "What's the meaning of life?" I replied that the meaning of life was that for whatever reason, we've developed the capacity to decide what is meaningful, that there are all sorts of possible things we can decide the meaning for, and that it's entirely up to us, that we are, in a way, if not co-creators of the universe, that we are creators of ourselves, and how we choose to define beauty. The meaning of life is what we make of it, and the purpose of life is what we choose to do with it. After that, I felt a relatively rapid and pleasant return to normal thinking. At no time were there any unpleasant sensations. One of my friends decided to try some again, and said that he felt like his experience was just on the cusp of where it could go bad. After he was finished, I decided to see what would happen if I didn't leave well enough alone, and tried again. This was about an hour and a half after the first working dose. This time, I only had to try it 3 times before it caught. The sensations were very good, but this second time, it was more of a physical thing, rather than the mental or spiritual experience the first time had been. It felt, in a way, as if I'd already used up whatever the experience was that I needed, and the second one was really just meaningless. I have to mention that other people have described the taste of vaporized 5-MeO-DMT as being bad tasting. I thought it was sort of pleasant and mild, and after I came down each time, my throat felt like I'd inhaled menthol vapors. By about an hour after the second trip, I felt completely normal, with a normal amount of energy and clarity, actually slightly better than I usually am. It was as if I hadn't used any drug at all. There were less lingering effects than smoking a cigarette or having a cup of coffee. My body felt completely normal and pleasant. I think that if I use this substance again, I almost certainly will. It was completely positive for me. I will try taking a larger single dose. It may be that part of why my experience was so good was that I did several 8 to 10 milligram doses before it hit, and I was slightly affected by those before the slightly larger dose worked. I just want to see the difference. The whole time, I had the feeling that this kind of experience could be perceived as incredibly bad or go wrong easily. My experience was wonderful and invigorating, but it was so powerful that I would suggest that people not treat this substance lightly or without respect. It didn't seem to me the type of thing you'd use for kicks or entertainment. I'm pretty sure if I had done this lightly, or even when I was younger, that I'd have ended up with the screaming memes. This is great stuff, but it is not a toy.
When the Universe is Ready for You. A 5-MeO-DMT trip report by Lococo. Uploaded to Earwid, June 17, 2013. Date of experience: the 5th of May, 2013. Material: 5-MeO-DMT at a dosage of 10 mg vaporized. Preface: it was everything I could have hoped it could be, and nothing I could have ever expected. Introduction. My soul had been growing ever more restless as my life was beginning to pull back together. The universe has ways of letting you know that you're on the right track, whether it's little bits thrown at you, clever remarks thrown your way from random donors, or that weird, comfortable, familiar feeling that you are meant to be here, in this exact space, at this exact moment in time. Whatever it may be, I was certainly getting my taste of the universe interest of my being. A good friend of mine, who I'll refer to as Pete, told me one day that he knew someone interested in meeting me. He had told me previously that this friend was very much into rare and exotic psychedelics, and I was very excited. I had numerous mushroom and LSD trips under my belt. However, neither of those wonderful substances could ever satisfy my hunger for whatever it was I was seeking. They only seemed to prepare me for the journey I did not realise I would soon take. At this point in my life, I was beginning to bloom. I'd left my dark and depressed stage behind, and for the most part, have been turning into more and more of a hippie every day. I'd recently decided upon joining a homesteading community, a commune if you will, and would be throwing myself firmly into life in just a month or two. Being raised in a mainly conservative household, this was a huge step for me, but it felt right. So back to it. Yes, of course I wanted to meet this mystery man and his magic shaving kit. Pete and I eventually make it to meet this mystery man, shaman, as he shall be called from this point, for symbolic purposes only, and we met at his home where he was relaxing with his friend, Buddy. Shaking hands with Shaman, I did not realise at the time that two kindred souls were reuniting, and we both soon found out his path needed to cross mine as much as mine needed to cross his. This is yet another wonderful sign from the universe. After a few hours of riveting conversation and refreshing intelligence that I had not known for a while, it was becoming clear to me that Shaman was to be my spiritual guide. It became even more obvious when Pete had to leave and Shaman asked if I would like to stay. Yes. No way was I going to pass up what I was hoping to be the journey of a lifetime. The experience. Sitting in Shaman's space with him and Buddy, I felt right. I felt like I belonged there. Then it happened. Shaman offered me my journey in the form of 5-MeO DMT. No pressure, he assures me, that it was there if I was ready for it. I'd heard plenty about DMT, but I'd only a slight clue of what 5-MeO was about from what Pete had told me. Excitedly, I accepted Shaman's offer, but remained a bit tepid, knowing this was not to be taken lightly. He had a few rituals to perform, familiarising me with the vehicle to the cosmos, cleansing the air, sending prayers to heaven, giving me the mantra, breathe, that sort of thing. After I inquired about his experiences taking and administering 5-MeO DMT, he assured me many times I would be alright, and that he was ready and qualified to share this with me. Shaman dimmed the lights, loaded that sweet 10 milligrams into the pipe, and it was time to go. With sweet, soothing sounds playing, and only the glow from the stereo in the room, Shaman and I sat cross-legged on the floor across from each other. Buddy off to the side, every bit a part of this journey as us two. The pipe was lit, a long harsh draw that I fully inhaled and held in. Almost immediately, my vision was assaulted by blocks floating in from the side and situating themselves in front of my eyes. Suddenly, they disappeared, and a great wall of multicoloured rays of light came rushing in to meet me. And then, the darkness. I was lost, and didn't know it. My soul had left my body, and it was nowhere to be found. I've tried my hardest to recall that blackness, to try and remember if anything was to be found in it, but it was impenetrable, and I recall absolutely nothing. Then, I was abruptly thrown out of the moment of darkness, as Shaman would later call it. My body was in a fit, and I saw myself vomiting into my own lap. Shaman grabbed my knee and said breathe, which had been my mantra going into this. Dozens of voices erupted around me, also telling me to breathe as if the spirits were guiding me along with my shaman. After a series of intense, offbeat breaths, which were a battle, a test of my willpower, a test I was not going to fail, a sudden calmness hit me. I remember feeling extremely hot, and as I took my shirt off, a cool breeze washed over me. As I laid my body to the ground, I knew that there could have been no other outcome to that trial. This was what my soul had been longing for, and this is exactly where I needed to be. For the first time in my life, everything was at peace. I was truly home, melted into the universe. The breeze grew and grew. I had just tasted the universe in its most raw, unadulterated form. All I could utter was, "Holy shit." Then Shaman replied, "Thank you." The spirits around us all agreed, and replied thank you with Shaman. Then I joined them all and uttered thank you back. At some point I had grabbed my shaman's wrist and I didn't want to let go, to leave home. Eventually the breeze subsided and I sat up and muttered, "I'm back." I looked down into my lap and thankfully there was no vomit there. I'd been humbled, and I was terrified, ecstatic, and a million other feelings that I cannot even begin to describe. God, the universe, the Great Spirit, call it what you will, it had taken an interest to me, and laid it out crystal clear that I was on the correct path. Still though, I was rattled, and there was nothing that could have prepared me for that. Conclusion. The most profound lesson I took away from that experience was my shaman assuring me that I could reach that place by sheer will, and that he does it all the time. He told me it's inside each and every one of us. It just needs to be practiced and honed like every other talent in life. All of this was told as we were sitting outside after the journey, as I was still trying to piece it all back together, and I just started coming to grips with what had happened, and it all hit me in a very profound way. Life has a funny way of giving us exactly what we need, when we need it most. Out of it, Beauty is to be had. Around a week later as I write this, I know Shaman and I were meant to cross each other's paths. We are, as he puts it, mirrors to see ourselves and reflect one another. I know full well that my soul had been crying out to find this kindred spirit for quite some time. As I throw myself out to life, after acknowledging the universe and being acknowledged back, I am filled with faith that it will take me exactly where I need to be.